My name is Charles Ross. I'm a principal in our technology and society practice. And so I do spend a lot of time talking about AI and talking to businesses about AI. And we are undoubtedly in this sort of peak of inflated expectations about what AI can do, the things it can solve, the impact it's going to have on people's lives and work and society. And rightly so, because it certainly has some transformative benefits or impact on all of us and society. And today, super excited to be talking about this from a sustainability perspective. Full title of the program, Green AI and Sustainable Digital Transformation. And I'm going to talk about the discussion in sort of two sorts of ways. First, I want to talk about how we can make the use of AI more sustainable. And then I want to talk about how we can leverage AI to make all of our businesses and organizations and industries more sustainable. So the sort of the industry applications of it. So to do this, I need some help from my fantastic panel. I've got three excellent panelists with you. I've got Aditya Tal, who is the Chief Digital Officer for Sime Darby Plantation, directly here on my left. I have Sharad Mehrotra, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of True Corporation. Thank you, sir, for joining us here today. Last but not least, Sherwin Palayo, who is the Executive Director, Analytics and Artificial Intelligence Association of the Philippines. I think full bios and things are on the event site if you want to read a little bit more about it. So we've got just under 45 minutes, and I'm going to make sure we do make some time for questions as well. So if you do have those, think about them, and I will go to you either during the session or keep them all to the end. We'll see how we go. So as I said in the intro here, what I want to try to achieve this session here is to really get to the bottom of AI and how we can make the use of it and the infrastructure around it more sustainable, and talk about that firstly. And maybe I will start with, who should I start with on this one? Maybe Sherwin, I'll start with you on this one. I get the feeling sometimes talking to business leaders and to users that there's sometimes a low understanding or appreciation of actually how much energy it takes to drive AI, particularly sort of Gen AI, which we're seeing a large proliferation of that. Would you agree with that? Is there a low understanding? Is there a problem there, and what could we potentially do about it?
There is actually. Because, especially with the explosion of generative AI, ChatGPT in 2022, most everyone actually started, seeing the advantages of using generative AI tools, okay? But there's really no regard on the computing resources needed to run large language models and these tools. There are actually now studies that, whenever large language models are created, it would generate probably more than twice the carbon footprint that a human person would produce in a year. And that's a lot, actually. I mean, the Earth, Mother Nature, would not be able to sustain that, for long. So while there is the appreciation on the productivity that Gen AI tools can provide us as users, there's still no understanding or even appreciation on the impact of the use of Gen AI tools in the environment.
Yeah, somebody used the example to me not too long ago that every time you plug a prompt into Gen AI, OpenAI or something, it's basically equivalent to sort of pouring a bottle of water down the drain. That's the amount of water it takes to obviously cool the processes behind that. So significant.
Yeah, so what we advise to users of Gen AI is, there's the reason why there's training on prompt engineering. Okay? Prompt engineering is not really just keeping on asking Gen AI tools to generate these questions. Okay? Efficient prompt engineering requires us to ask Gen AI in the least number of questions, okay? So that you can get what you need from Gen AI in one go. Okay? It's not like a conversation. Okay? Definitely you can. But if you take it like individually, you probably don't see any impact, right? But if everyone, on the planet starts having conversation with Gen AI tools, that's definitely going to impact the environment. So efficient prompt engineering is actually going to be key.
Yeah, I can see that being a sort of a new class at school or something around how to create the perfect prompts and how to brief Gen AI properly, because it is going to be integrated to that extent. And it's not just important for getting good outcomes, it's important obviously for the sustainability, be more efficient around that. Sharad, any sort of views on that? Do you see, apart from better prompts, other ways of us be able to get more energy efficient around AI?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I would think that we come from technology side, as we are a telco company, and we of course using a lot of network and data centers, and of course there is energy consumption. And the question you're asking is, of course, how can we reduce energy consumption? Can we use AI and so on? Answer is yes. So if I may probably go a bit deep on it. So if you look at, there are two types of camps. One is of course AI, which probably we are familiar for a couple of years. Second camp is generative AI, which is more creative, right? So on the first one, we at True, we have a first-hand experience of implementing AI. We have used on real-time network without affecting consumer experience. We have a grip on algorithm where we see how do we do energy reduction, and we have in-house model where we have already reached 15% of energy reduction. And of course, you will say, is it enough? Then I would say yes. If you look at for our customers, especially on the business side, there also we have used and similar kind of results are there without having need to change any infrastructure. So at the same time, what is also happening is that everybody is consuming more data.
Yeah.
So we have seen 10% growth on data consumption because there is no stopping to application usage. Every time some new thing coming up, and then
is that annual 10% annually? What
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, okay.
At True, we are seeing 10% data consumption growth on GB, which is of course quite in line, which is good news because people are using it for the right purpose. But then the question is that if you are having 10 to 15% energy reduction, is it enough? And then through the second point, which is, I think he also talked about generative AI, or I would call it transformative AI. And recently we have learned that Microsoft announced that they found some items which when they are used, then probably there is a less need of lithium, 70% in the batteries. That in my view could be a game changer once understood properly. So what I'm thinking is that once you go into deep detail, and that is a right thing to do, that can have probably a substantial impact on further energy reductions. So my point is that there is no end to technology, so we need to be very consistent and of course following the area that how do we go further deep on energy reduction, because I believe that reducing carbon emission has a big role to play in climate change. And that's where we are always curious and hungry, and that's what probably I'm giving example from the telecom side.
Excellent, thank you for sharing. From a Syme Darby perspective, I know you're going to talk about some of the use cases of how you're using AI shortly. But first, before we get to that, when you're thinking about use of AI, how do you think about that in terms of efficiency and the systems that you're using, and to try and minimize the sort of the energy consumption of it, increase the sustainability of it?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. My background, interestingly, is in software development. I don't think I understand fully what's the real cost of running Gen AI. But the good news is, when we think about agriculture especially, we see a lot more benefit in narrow AI. As in, we have very specific use cases where we can actually increase our productivity and efficiency by using more narrow application of AI as opposed to thinking about Gen AI. Now, when it comes to narrow AI, I think there's still, again, a very nuanced discussion that needs to happen with the business on what the real use case is. Because if I take an example, a few years ago, we built a AI which would help us predict our yield into the future, 12 months ahead. And when we started this use case, the requirement from the business was literally to have a 90 or 95% accuracy on this model. We were about 70% accuracy when we started. Every % increase in accuracy means more data, more training, more user resources. And that's a real load on the app, on the AI that we are building, right? The question is, what's the real use case? If the use case is for the business to budget better, then I can understand they need 90 to 95% accuracy. But there are other use cases which will allow us to run our operations more efficiently downstream, right? So if I can predict my yield upfront, I can optimize logistics, I can optimize transport, I can optimize the planning that needs to happen in mills and refineries. And for that, I don't need to be 90 to 95% accurate. I could be at least 70, 80% accurate. And so I think that discussion with the business is very important, what the real use case is, what the benefit will be, and therefore what the cost could be associated with that. On the software and the tooling side as well, I think there's not that much that we do in terms of understanding the true performance of software. I think on hardware, it's probably a lot more easier. But on software, I've been a software development manager in the past, and when we talk about performance of software, we are typically thinking about functionality, we are thinking about security, we are thinking about speed, but not necessarily the environmental cost of it. And I think there are some tools now coming up. So there is the Green Software Foundation, for example, that provides best practices and tooling. And these things need to be looked into more so that the teams and the software development managers are more responsible in terms of the cost of running and building AI. But it's not as much as some of the advances that are happening on the hardware side.
I think your first point was a really good one, that it doesn't need to be perfect, does it? You need to put as much sort of technology into it, as much sort of processing into it to get enough business value out of it to make it worthwhile. You don't need your 95% here as well. You don't need to throw all the data in the world and all the processing power in the world at it. It doesn't.
Yeah, and in agriculture, to be honest, we don't really have that much data. We are knowledge rich, but data poor.
Yeah.
As in, we have lots of people who remain in agriculture for generations, and so they have a lot of tacit knowledge. But really, not many of these operations have been digitized, so we are lacking data. So the quality of data also becomes an issue. And is that data really worth training things on sometimes? So there are lots of questions to be asked around really understanding the impact of that AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just a quick one on this agriculture, and I would relate to smart farming. We have been talking a lot of things about making farmer more effective through smart farming, but I don't think they really got a benefit in that area so far. So it's good to hear that the tools you're talking about, and in my view, maybe how you relate to this narrow AI, I would think more multi-modal AI probably could be a way to go for smart farming, where you have a web camera and a drone probably provided to a farmer that could cover the area. And then, of course, you have database the way you're talking about. So that could be really beneficial, and we can bring smart farming to reality. That would be the game changer. And of course, a lot of use cases on this Gen AI side. So I'm related to that mainly on transformative AI.
Excellent. I'm going to move direction slightly and now focus on both the enabling environment for AI for businesses to be able to get the best sustainable value out of AI, and then talk about use cases. And to get to that, I just want to ask the audience a poll. So we have a polling question for all of you. I'm going to get you answer the question and then get your view on it while we see the results coming up. So I think we're going to get the poll just up on the screen here. And the poll question, is it coming? It's not coming on my screen yet. I think it's going to come shortly. I'll give you a warning. The poll question is the regional policy and regulatory environment supportive of company needs to leverage AI for the benefit of climate change mitigation? We're not getting it on the screen, are we? No. I will come back to the polling question if we can at some point. Well, let me ask my panelists first around that question. So the question was, maybe we'll get a chance for the audience to answer this one as well, is the regional policy and regulatory environment supportive of company needs to leverage AI for the benefit of climate change mitigation? So at Sime Darby, when you're looking at how you can apply AI to some of your agricultural areas, are you ever... Is policy ever an inhibitor to that? Is it stopping you doing what you really want to do, or is the environment set up to sort of help you thrive?
Well, we know regulation typically follows innovation. So innovators tend to be ahead of the game, essentially. But that doesn't mean that there's no regulation to support us, right? So an area, for example, today, you were speaking about drones earlier. We fly drones as well for some of our spraying activities. But the drone regulations in Malaysia don't allow these drones to be flown beyond visual line of sight. And therefore, that means that there's always a drone pilot that needs to be with the drone as well. Now, if we ever have to achieve this at a large scale, at the scale that we operate, we do need more swarm-based technologies where a pilot could be actually monitoring more than one drone. And that means that these drones should be allowed to actually even go beyond visual line of sight. So there are some regulations that still need to be tweaked. But generally, I think there is a lot of investment that the governments are making, not just in Malaysia, I'm sure even in Philippines and other places as well, here in Thailand as well. There are lots of investments being made in terms of connectivity. Connectivity still remains a challenge, by the way, in agriculture, because most of our plantations are in remote areas. So whilst 5G is coming in, but it's not ubiquitous, and it still needs to reach those remote areas. And then there is investments being made in data center capacity so that we have the capacity to execute and compute and store at scale and so forth. So I think there are lots of things that are happening. Maybe another area where regulation or not regulation, but some sort of support may be essential is to think about talent or skills. Because when we talk about AI, we also feel like there's a lack of skills around things that we want to do in Sime plantation. For example, we are focusing a lot on robotics, but where are the robotics engineers today? It's very difficult to find robotics engineers in the market. And this is true not just for, robotics or AI, but basically various technical skills. I think our universities and our education system needs to be looked at very closely in terms of, are we really preparing talent for future skills? Some countries, Singapore probably is a little bit ahead in this space. But that's where I think we need a little bit more support from the government as well, because we do need, there will be a shift in skills, even for us. We are moving away from manual labor, now introducing drone pilots and bot operators and so forth. Where are these people going to come from? So I think we do need some support in that space.
Yeah, we do at Economist Impact, we do quite a lot of work around skills and the skills for the future, and things like green skills are coming up a lot in terms of their need and their requirements, although sort of they're a bit more, companies expect them to be a bit more important in 5 years' time than they are today. But what is super important now are sort of those technical skills around the sorts of things that you're talking about. I often think that maybe there's not enough alignment between the university systems and what industry needs. You're nodding there. So what do you think about the regulatory environment or any other barriers to sort of doing more with AI that you would like to do? Are we in a good place, or do we need more support?
No, I tend to agree what other colleague or panelist is talking about. I think what I understand is that there are always some kind of consultative guidelines on AI globally, as well as in Thailand. And I strongly believe they are more hinting towards ethical AI. This is probably very important. And I can relate it to TrueCorp. What we have in the company, we already have it's like a committee with guardian principle, which is called a consultative committee to have ethical AI. It is important that we should have mitigation to bias, we should have mitigation to diversity, we should have data transparency, and so on. So those kind of things are, of course, being there at our company. On the other side, the point you're alluding to is also hinting towards public-private partnership. How about that in that area? And I would think, coming from the telco tech background, I would think that is probably very important. We should embrace that. That will probably accelerate the adoption of the right technology at the right place. And I would think the first one to probably, or the potential I see on the SME side, because it is quite a large kind of sizing. You look at any country, including Thailand, and is probably easy to go with, because that will make a very probably large change in any country, bringing SMEs. But it's equally complicated and cumbersome, because not easy to have a process defined with this kind of SME segment, and that you need to have, in my view, a lot of inspection, a lot of procedures and so on to get in there. That probably quite helpful once we do that. But that is definitely a very important, kind of remark.
And Sherwin, from your perspective, you've got a lot of member companies in part of your association. What are they talking about in terms of the the support that we're getting here from a policy environment perspective, whether that's around the right regulation for AI, whether it's about sort of setting up the system to have the right talent coming through to support it, or whether it's about money. Is there enough money in there to support this?
So let's talk about money, though.
Okay,
It seems
we'll talk about money.
the easiest one. No, I mean, as far as the Philippines is concerned, there's definitely support from the Philippine government, especially on startups, businesses, entrepreneurs who want to develop AI applications, for the country, and then for the benefit of our the Filipinos. So there's certainly support there. In terms of policies, I think like what Sharad mentioned, there's definitely policies. We adopt ISO standards as Philippine national standards on AI. But those policies are still centered around human rights, consumer protection, consumer rights, not necessarily on the environment. I think going back to the earlier discussion, there's this conscious effort of making sure that AI will not harm people, but there's no acknowledgement that AI may harm the environment.
Yeah.
It's there, probably government, our regulators are suggesting, not mandating, private organizations to report on SDGs and ESGs, but it's really just reporting, okay, on their environment sustainability goals. But there's really no say, okay, you need to achieve this particular amount of reduction on carbon emission, for example. There's no mandated or regulation around that. Okay, it's just okay. Be very careful about human rights, consumer protection, but environment. Let's look at that, later. So in terms of that, there's really low consciousness about the environment. In terms of skill, one of the things that we've actually done is, and we're actually going to launch this very soon, is the Philippine Skills Framework for Analytics and Artificial Intelligence. It's based on actually the skills future in Singapore, where we identified career paths. We asked our industry and even the practitioners, what are the various career paths in analytics and AI? What are the competencies and proficiency levels? We're done with that. We're now handing it over to our academic sector so that they can create education training programs at the competency and proficiency level. That way, we are hoping to minimize, if not totally eliminate, the skills mismatch between what the industry needs versus what the academic sector produces. So I think that's a concerted effort, in the country to have those skills framework.
Yeah. Super important. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Singapore is trying to eliminate that gap. They like to eliminate these sort of inefficiencies in the system, and that seems to be a very laudable one to try and do. And you brought up a point here when we're talking about sustainable digital transformation here and green AI. We're not just talking about the environmental impact here. We're also talking about society as well. So you talk about inclusion and so on and so forth as well. We've got about 20 minutes left. I just want to get into a little bit about some of the exciting applications for AI that you're doing at Time Derby and some of the things that you're doing as well. And then as promised, I am going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So have a think about those and I'll come to you in a moment. So from your perspective, what sort of excites you about the applications of AI in the sector that you're working in? If you're able to share the roadmap for the next sort of 5 or 10 years, what could we hope to get from this?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot that can be done with AI. I was talking about narrow AI earlier, right? So one of the areas is precision farming. I think you call it smart farming. Precision farming is basically applying the right inputs or taking the right intervention at the right time and the right place. And as soon as we talk about precision, we can almost imagine that AI has a big role to play. So let's take one example, applying fertilizers. We know that we over-apply fertilizers in agriculture generally, and a large amount of these fertilizers are essentially lost. And so how do we actually optimize the use of fertilizer And so that's something that we've been working on over the last few years. A very a simple model that we built 6 years ago was basically just stitching together drone images and training a model to identify the number of tree stands that we have. And that just means that we are actually procuring the right amount of fertilizer to begin with, right? So as soon as we procure the right amount, then we ensure that there's no human error involved in wasting that fertilizer. Of course, we've automated the entire planning to procurement process, reducing the manual interventions that are required in the process for fertilizers itself. And what we are working on today is actually trying to estimate, if you like, a vitality or build a vitality index for each and every one of our planted palms. So using multispectral imagery as an example, and then combining that with ground truthing data, can we actually have a model that tells us whether this particular area is water stressed, whether there might be an early detection of a disease like Ganoderma, for example. And that just means that we are able to intervene earlier as opposed to later, right? So again, these models don't need to be 100% accurate, but we want them to be at least 60 or 70% accurate so that we can intervene earlier. And again, then extend this concept to actually build over a period of time with more data, a health index for each and every of our palms so that we can treat them to the right level. We can have the right amount of fertilizer being applied to each and every palm, as opposed to what happens today, which is, all the palms in this particular space get the same amount of dosage. So that's just one area. The other area that is very exciting for us right now is robotics. And this became a problem for us during COVID, because during COVID, we had less number of workers available to us in our estates. Now, remember, in agriculture, we have a number of foreign workers involved in our operations. It happens in various countries, not just in Europe, in Malaysia, and in Asia. And so many of these foreign workers left because of COVID. They went back to their families, and then we are stuck with no workers and loss in productivity. And that just sort of inspired us to think about how do we transform not just ourselves, but even this industry. And so this is when we started on robotics. Now, robotics involves a lot of AI. So we are talking about drones. We are talking about ground-based drones. So again, going back to the fertilizer example, today we are working on prototypes which are autonomous vehicles that will help us spread fertilizers. These autonomous vehicles not only have to navigate the space, which is quite tricky on its own, but also have to identify where the tree stands are, then spread the right amount of fertilizer at the right time. And stop fertilizing or stop applying fertilizer when there are no tree stands, for example. And so these are applications that excite us because they help us reduce, first of all, the number of workers that are involved in the process. They make the process a lot more efficient and safer, and of course helps us reduce cost as well, right? So there are lots of these kind of applications where we are seeing AI being extremely promising.
We've been talking a lot about sort of collaboration as a way of being able to sort of share across all industries and all markets across this region the benefits. And I'm just thinking, you're talking about precision farming, talking about robotics, and I'm thinking we're a very large, diverse area here in Asia, lots of smallhold farmers as well. To what extent do you think they're getting the same opportunity to leverage this? Because, in order to sort of meet the sort of targets that we need to, everyone's going to have to be included. Do they have the same opportunity, or how can we get them the opportunity?
Oh, well, the short answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Because it requires a lot of upfront investment. And this is where SIMW Plantation is fortunate. But again, we see it as part of our responsibility. And like I said, we want us not to transform ourselves. We think they should transform the industry. So when we are at the prototyping stage today, hopefully as these technologies are proven and get commercialized, we do have plans to actually share this technology with the rest of the industry as well, including the smallholders. We've got to figure out what's the best model to reach some of these smallholders, because remember, the smallholder market or the supply chain of the smallholders is very fragmented.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have direct access to some of these smallholders. So, we've got to figure out what's the right model to make it work. But
and you might be able to share the technology, but they've still got to have the skills and the expertise to be able to use it and leverage it.
Exactly. And I think we've got to think about whether there's a service-based model that allows us to operate as a service, but the smallholders benefit from it. As long as it increases the profitability of the smallholder farmer and benefits them, I think we should look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Sharad, from your perspective, what sort of excites you in the telecom sector about applications of AI, if we're sort of looking into the future a little bit? Where can we see this sort of playing out?
Yeah, it's definitely exciting times ahead for all of us across the globe and the industries. So, since the topic of this panel is green AI and of course digital transformation, so I'll pick up one on digital transformation and one or two on green AI. So maybe first I start with green AI. I talked about the way we are helping on the climate change with the energy efficiency on the network side, as we of course have a large network, pan Thailand. We of course have a lot of subscribers, as I said, a lot of data consumed, and we are already making sustainable efforts on energy efficiency. The second one I pick up is data centers. That is also quite common nowadays. We do have 5 data centers, and of course in data centers they consume a lot of energy, right? And of course you can save or maybe do better with 3 ways. One is offsetting emissions. Second, of course, conserving less energy, and third, of course, generating clean energy. So based on our assessment and the experience, the first one, offsetting emissions, is not really that easy. It bit cumbersome. So I won't look at that much more. Second, reducing power is easy one, and that probably help partially, not fully, as data consumption going up, energy consumption going up, and so on. So then the final one is about generating clean energy. That is probably very relevant for us. And if you look at on our overall sites we have in Thailand, we have around 20% sites which use solar power, which is quite good. But the concern we have is that once you move towards urban area, it is very difficult to get the area where you can deploy solar cells, and that's where we get stuck. However, if you look at data centers, the good part is that it is concentrated at one place. Yeah. Easier to implement, this kind of renewable energy, which is probably quite good. So we have already one solar, complete on one data center, and rest of the 4 ones we are progressing to do that. That is our task ahead going forward.
As an organization, do you have a plan to get to sort of net zero?
Of course, yeah.
What is it? What year are you aiming for?
Yeah, we have 2 targets. One is 2030 and 2050. One is of course for greenhouse gas emissions, which is landmass, which is earlier, and of course neutrality is towards 2050. And that is probably we measure it quite right in the organization. Yeah. If we look at landmass field, because we are modernizing our network in Thailand. So of course we have a lot of e-waste. We have a lot of waste. So what we do that we have very systematic way of procedure where we make sure that everything is finished off. We are responsible for zero waste on our side. So that, because this is also very important, you produce a lot of emissions. So how do we do that? So that part is heading quite well. We also even help some of our partners, vendors in this area. And second part also we talked about climate change through reducing carbon emissions, the one I talked about.
Yeah, you mentioned e-waste. I mean, I think that's often an overlooked and underappreciated issue, and often the ecosystem is really not in place to be able to deal with that.
Very well said. And then maybe I can touch upon, once the time permits, about digital transformation.
Sure.
Okay. What we have done is that we have implemented a BNIC, Business Network Integration Center. What it does is that the task ahead for us is to provide all the time superior experience to our customers, right? How do we do that? So we go through contextual. We use AI and also Gen AI use cases to make sure that all the analytic to serve personalization for each of the customers. And that is done through Business Network Integration Center, where we have a view on each of the geography, on the macro areas, cluster areas, what is happening in which area. We also implement the best practices. If we have received some complaint on the network side in, say, Chiang Mai, why don't we implement that as a best practice if it is a repetitive complaint? Yeah. So BNIC as a one moment or source of truth helps us to provide best experience to customers, at the same time making sure that we are implementing ethical AI, at the same time also helping on the climate change, as we talked about, to other arenas on the green AI part.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Sherwin, from your perspective, I'm sort of really, you've got a lot of member organizations within your association, and they've probably got some really interesting applications here. Sort of keen to understand, maybe even from a smaller organisation, because we often get the perspective of what big organisations, well-funded organisations, Sime Darby, I think we've heard some exciting stuff there. What else are we seeing potentially at the other sort of middle or lower end of the spectrum in terms of company sizes?
Yeah. So while the Philippines is still primarily or predominantly an agriculture country, one of our biggest earners in our GDP or gross domestic product is our IT BPM industry, the IT business process management industry. So that's why, you know, from the smaller consulting organizations to the larger organizations, we are you know, skilling and upskilling them on the efficient development of AI systems. Okay, we want to bring back the rigor and the discipline that, you know, I've been in IT industry for about 30 years now. You know, way back in the 90s. Okay, that was in the 90s. Okay, you know, where we really had that discipline in producing, you know, software code in the least amount of time possible. I remember, you know, coding on the mainframe, and, you know, one of our clients were counting the number of times we compile a code, because every time that you compile a code on the, I think everyone, some of us here still remember the mainframe, right? Okay, every time that we compile a code, it eats a lot of resources. Okay, so the least amount of time that you compile, that's a one way to measure our performance as software developers. It's the same thing right now. It's the saying that, you know, even if there are certain AI tools that will allow you to do no code or low code, you still need to be able to do a code in one go. Okay, you need to be more efficient on that, because, you know, as you use these AI tools, again, you will be also using a lot of computing resources. Okay, so do it first. We tell them, okay, do it first on your, you know, own laptop or computer, and then once you're confident that it's going to work, then you start, you know, compiling using certain computing resources. You know, that's one of the things that we're doing as part of our skilling and upskilling. The second is we're actually identifying roles in the AI process and break them into smaller chunks, so that the processing in AI is limited to the heavy duty work or the tasks. So I mean, when we do an AI application, for example, we start first, of course, with data collection. And then you train your models, and then you create your interfaces on AI, right? While data quality, for example, and data cleaning can be done by AI tools right now. And they're saying, okay, you know, you don't mind cleaning the data anymore, because, you know, all of these natural language processing, you know, AI can do that. But that's going to eat resources. So yes, while AI can understand dirty data, it's going to eat a lot of computing resources. So we're saying that, you know, let's break up the process. Let's have data annotators, you know, data quality engineers that will clean the data using less, you know, computing resources. Make sure that, you know, even when we ask data from our end users or our consumers, let's make sure that the interfaces do the proper quality checks. So that when it gets stored, you know, in data, it's clean already, right? And then that's the time you go put it in a data science or an AI model. Okay, so basically the processing of the data gets distributed across the development process and even to computing resources.
So I guess, I mean, Aditya pulled out this point as well. We need to get much more sort of sensitive and clever in terms of how we use it, where we apply it, and it's not a big hammer to sort of solve everything. Right. We need to be sort of much more cautious and careful about it, because obviously at the back of it we need to understand it's not about just, you know, plugging something into today's mainframe. There's a huge amount of processing behind it, and we need to be cognizant of that. I almost feel like a sort of, at least from a consumer perspective on OpenAI or something, ChatGPT, we need to have a sort of a ticker showing how many resources we're sort of turning up for this session or for this particular sort of prompt that we're putting in, just to generate a lot more awareness about the implications of this. We've got about 5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience for my panelists here, do put your hand up and we can get to you with a microphone. I know we're getting towards the end of the day, but please do. Yes, excellent. Thank you. We have a question here just behind the column. Thank you.
Hi, I would like.
I think it's on.
Hi.
No?
I would like to know what skills that you think AI would never ever replace human. Like we will still have jobs for like later generation, you know.
So the question for those of you who may not have heard it was what skills will AI never replace? Which are those jobs that you need to have? So if you've got small kids, these are the sort of careers maybe you want to sort of push them into for future sort of resilience. Do you have a response on that one? Which one do you think?
If I had a crystal ball, no, actually, to be honest, it's a very difficult question to answer. I don't think anyone can very confidently say these skills will definitely be replaced. What we do know is that AI should be seen as a good assistant as opposed to taking over jobs from humans. So even in the machines that we are introducing, the AI is there to support probably the operator. The operator doesn't need to be on the machine anymore. Could be sitting in a nice, comfortable room somewhere, but doesn't replace the human in the loop, essentially. So we do think that there's a role for humans to be involved. Of course, with Gen AI, we are seeing a lot of excitement, maybe even to some extent hype, around the kind of applications that or things that Gen AI can do. We are seeing things like even creator jobs being replaced by what Gen AI can do. We can have text to video very easily. We were talking about, maybe someday movies could be made with Gen AI. We don't know where this goes. But I do think I'm the kind of person who's a little bit more optimistic always. So I do think that as some of these old jobs get replaced, the new jobs will get created. We just don't know what those new jobs are. And I think, at least for me, on the good side, is not something that can happen overnight or will happen overnight. So there's some time for us to really understand and sort of build these new jobs. What I do understand today is that it's very important for us in this room to think about, if we have young kids, do our young kids, for example, understand enough of what's going on behind the scenes? Do they have the fundamental knowledge of engineering, computing? Do they understand sustainability and how sustainability should play a part with AI as well? And I think that kind of education would be very important to sort of have.
The research we've been doing at Economist Impact, it's very much about sort of soft skills are the ones which are not going to be able to be replaced. Sort of, the ones with need a lot of emotional intelligence, dealing with people. Those are the important ones. Probably a few years ago, I might have added creative skills to that, but actually, I think we've seen from Gen AI that they're probably less valuable than they once were, although you can be creative in prompting the AI to do what you need to do. So it sort of shifted the creativity a little bit. You wanted to add something?
No, I just want to add a few comments. I think what you said is right. What we are experiencing is that you have number of tasks. I think AI helps to reduce those tasks. And that's how you become faster, because there is some kind of a database. This is one. Second, what we are doing at True is to assessing the digital capability of the people and the employees and so on. So what we are doing is, how can everyone be upskilled and be digital citizens? So as we look at now, we have done some kind of psychometric test. We figured out that we have about 20 to 25% already digital citizens at the respective areas. But how can we move from here at this level to higher to 70 or 80% over 2 to 3 years? And that's where our the cross-functional team from L&D is busy in working and sorting out how can you make more digital citizens in the country. Not necessarily IT side, but of course also in general, and that is going to be helpful for us. We of course embrace all technologies like we did 5G. So there was era of web, cloud, now AI. So of course we're embracing it quite well for benefit of consumers and society.
I think we have time for one more quick question if we have one. Yes, straight up, very quick. Thank you.
Hi, sorry. Yeah. How can we be more responsible in using AI? I know we talk about, the consume, the energy that AI use, like to compute the model or anything. Is it have to be something that we can capture, like the computing time, similar to we capture like carbon thing? Because now a lot of company will be using a lot of AI. I'm also in software technology as well. They just want to understand, like, do we need to be more aware of, the like a computing time and things like that, and
So
how you capture it.
Specifically responsible for the energy consumed by AI. Yeah, and I think measurements and data around how much data we're using from this is one thing. Is it just about that? Is it just about the data, being able to have a better understanding around that?
Right now, that's the only thing that we can,
Yeah.
look into. I mean, the hardware changes. We're talking about, should we be discussing quantum computing now? No, that's several years ago.
Yeah.
No, until we have that type of resource or hardware that can really support the needs of the computing resources that AI needs, it's really up to us for now to really make efficient use of the AI tools.
And also, maybe what I understand is that many countries are implementing smart meters for home use, where you're giving data reading, or you get a Google link or some link where you can fill up the reading. So it's more a trust-based system. It is becoming quite common, quite familiar. So in my view, with the advancement, this will become quite simplified for consumers. But of course, we have to have patience. As I said before, ethical AI is very important, which we support, and we want everyone to embrace it with wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We are unfortunately out of time there. If you do have some other questions, I'm sure our panelists wouldn't mind if you doorstop them outside or something like that. But I do appreciate the questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's a really interesting time that we're at in the development of AI and this sort of peak of inflated expectations, if you follow the Gartner hype cycle around that. I think we're sort of there. We're probably moving a little bit into the trough of disillusionment, where we realize it can't fix everything just like this. And there are actually some serious things we need to think about, which is obviously the energy use of AI. It's not just a magic wand to sort of fix everything. So it's going to be a bit harder to get that, but that business value and also those sort of environmental and sustainability benefits out of AI as well. So there's still work to do, but we need to be, I for one, whenever I go onto my ChatGPT, I'm going to be thinking about how much water is this going to be consuming when I'm putting that. Do I really need to ask that question or not? And probably we all need to get into that sort of mindset, don't we? So thank you for your time. Big thank you to Aditya, to Sharad, and to Sherwin for your participation here. It was a really good discussion. This brings us almost to the end of the third Sustainability Week Asia. I hope most of you have been here for the last 2 days and have seen a lot and met a lot of new people and got a lot of good value out of it. There will be a fourth Sustainability Week. Hopefully it's back here. I think there's a bit of a poll amongst people around here, and we probably want to come back here, but we'll see. We'll let you all know where we're going to be next time. I think we're going to put the word cloud up again, although last time I asked for the audience poll, we didn't manage to get that. No, we've got the word cloud here. And so for those of you who've been here for the last couple of days, you will have seen this word cloud coming up on the stage, and it is the answer to the question, the greatest barrier to fostering sustainability in my organization is or are. And it's interesting, after 2 days, we've got through, it's around awareness, which is probably really that sort of cross-cutting theme across all sustainability themes. For the discussion we've just had here, it's awareness about the environmental sustainable impact of AI when we are using it and when we're implementing it. And we're seeing that sort of awareness across financing sustainability as well. In some of the other sessions we've had, it's around awareness of the sort of sustainability skills you need. We've had in some other panel discussions here as well. So that awareness and that mindset are sort of interesting points coming out of this one across the 2 days. If we skip forward to next year's Sustainability Week, I wonder if we're going to get something something similar, or whether we will have solved the awareness problem here. I suspect not. So I think we're now going to run a very short film just to recap the last couple of days, to reminisce on. If we want to play that film now, thank you.
Sawadi Donchao Yindi Tonrab.
Good morning and welcome to Sustainability Week, Asia.
As we are gathering here, we are witnessing the profound impact of climate change. The global temperature continues to rise. The ocean is getting warmer.
Focusing in on sustainability, we really are there to try to help accelerate the transition to a sustainable and more equitable future.
Good morning, everyone, and that was quite an energetic start to the day. Fantastic.
Excellent. I hope that brought back some good memories for the last couple of days. The doors aren't quite shut yet, though. Feel free to clap if you like. I didn't produce this, but somebody deserves some applause for that one. Really well done in a short period of time. As I was saying, the doors aren't shut yet because we do have a little bit left after this session going on. There's some coffee and networking coming up now, and just after that, if you do have more questions or more you want to contribute to green AI and the things we've been discussing now, we have a working group coming up, which is just after the coffee break, and there still are some places left for that. I'll be there for that discussion, and it's sort of it's a smaller, intimate type of setup where you'll have the opportunity to network and discuss with your peers around some of those green AI sort of opportunities and challenges which you are sort of looking at and focusing on. So I do encourage you to join me after the coffee break if you have the time for that. So I'm just going to leave it there for a moment. I realize we didn't appreciate and applaud our panelists for their discussion, so I'm going to applaud them. I'm going to applaud you for coming for the last couple of days as well, and thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees.
Thanks.